Welcome to the Healthcare Leadership Lab. My name is Dr. Kathy Albert. On behalf of my co-founder, Jeffrey Vargas, we wanted to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us. Healthcare Leadership Lab is a platform for you. We are a community of healthcare workers and providers that uh, we have uh, experience in leadership programs. We have asynchronous and synchronous programs, workshops, and breakouts. But really, what Healthcare Leadership Lab offers is the community platform so we can connect as healthcare workers in any aspect of the healthcare ecosystem you work in to engage in critical dialogue about topics that we really need to start just having, especially in these trying times. A little background on me. I'm a nurse practitioner. I've been in healthcare for about a quarter of a century, and I have experienced and observed many of the challenges that you all have as healthcare workers. So I get it. My co founder, Jeffrey Vargas, is a future of work expert and also has a passion for intergenerational workforce development. I wanted to ask you a question first. What brought you to healthcare? Because my sense is it is to take care of patients. My sense also is that because you're in healthcare, you are a tender, loving, compassionate being. Consider this. What if you deepened your ability to be tender, compassionate, and empathetic to your colleagues so we can get through this mess together? I want to introduce to you a former colleague of mine and one of my favorite people in the world, Mrs. Susan Ashley. She is a licensed clinical social worker and the vice president of program and education at the cancer support community. She has 25 years experience in oncology and in leadership, and is also an avid Dolly Parton enthusiast, has the wig to prove it, a mother of a middle schooler, and the emotional support human for her poodle. So we're going to talk about the superpowers of tenderness and apology. So Susan, thank you so much for joining us. I
Thank you.
wanted to have you share with our listeners a little bit about yourself as a healer, what brought you into the arena of healthcare, and just tell us a little bit about why you feel that tenderness and apology are so critical for us as a healthcare community to embrace.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here, and to see you. It's like old times for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
So to understand how I got here, you'd have to know me at age 5 when I was in kindergarten, and it was within the first few weeks of school. And the girl that shared my desk did not have hair and wore a polka dotted scarf. What I didn't know then is that she had leukemia. And back in the early 1970s, as you know, that was a not a good diagnosis, and that was going to not end well. And I had this incredible need to know what was wrong. And the parents of our classroom had decided that we didn't need to know.
Mm.
Because we didn't at age 5 need to know that someone our age could be sick or could die. And I just kept persisting. Um, And finally, that little girl didn't come to school anymore, and
Mm.
we learned that she had died. But it was at that moment that was really the informing of who I'd become in ways that I could not have known at age 5, right? But there
Right.
were some things that that when I think back on that moment, which is there was absolutely no tenderness for that young girl, right? So she had to go to school with a secret, right? And her classmates could not support her. We didn't know if we could play with her because we knew she had to rest a lot. We weren't sure if we needed to help her. We didn't have a language, so we ignored her because our parents would not speak of what was happening. So for me, that moment in time when I think back of how did I become an oncology social worker? How did I become this person? I, it I go immediately back. I can see it in my mind. I can see the desk and I can see the lack of tenderness by the adults for her story and for the story we were telling ourselves as well, which is that illness is something we should avoid and that we couldn't talk about things that were important. So that's how I got to today, and why I've dedicated my life to kind of pebbling the walk and walking alongside people impacted by cancer.
Mhm. So, as healthcare workers, we just discussed how we extend empathy and kindness and compassion to our patients. What is your perspective on how that plays out as a community, as a healthcare worker community?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why we come to this work is to serve, right, and to be helpers. And we're called to that in different ways: nursing, uh, physicians, right, social workers, medical assistants. We're all called to this work from a different perspective. And while we want to demonstrate incredible compassion, we often don't extend that to each other. And often we don't even extend that to ourselves. And
Mhm.
in many ways, healthcare is not set up for a lot of compassion or tenderness. So I'm thinking about my first year as a head and neck cancer social worker in 1997. I was in a teaching hospital in Chicago, and I was wandering around with the residents and the attending physician, because that's what you did. You were a little beehive all around the one attending. And the attending would just start grilling the residents at bedside. And if the resident didn't have the right answer, there was immediate humiliation of that resident in front of his or her peers and in front of the patient. And I learned that first week on my job that maybe there was no compassion here. Because if we couldn't learn, if we already had to be the knowers, if we couldn't be the learners, then there was going to be no space for forgiveness, for mistakes,
Mm.
or for apology. And that meant then we were also going to be very dismissive of the humans we were caring for, right? Because if
Mhm.
you're armoring up when you go to work for fear you might get called out, there's no way then you can be gentle and vulnerable in front of that patient you're about to support and listen to. And so healthcare in its very way has not allowed us to be fully even human ourselves in order to be fully present and human with the people that we are caring for. I don't know if
Yeah.
that resonates or if that makes sense to you, but that's
It
been my
it certainly
experience.
it certainly does for me. Even before the pandemic, we have had walls up, and I really feel that the pandemic has hardened us, perhaps with our patients. And we even have a mask. This is our wall. We can't really see each other smile and full
Mhm.
expression. Uh, so, how do you think the pandemic has um, impacted our ability to be tender with ourselves and with each other? We see a significant increase in burnout, alarming rates, suicide. Individuals are leaving the workforce, and I I feel that we're disconnected with the reason we came into healthcare. We came into healthcare to treat our patients. We came into healthcare because of the camaraderie we have with each other. We all get it. We get working in an emergency department, inpatient, outpatient, in oncology for you and I. But so tell us how you think that the pandemic has impacted us, because you've talked a lot about healthcare being a house of cards, and the reason that it can fall and is falling apart is because we aren't maintaining the integrity. I don't really feel that we're taking care of the people who are taking care of the people well enough to sustain the system and what we do.
Yeah. Well, we got mixed up a long time ago when we said the customer was always right.
Mm,
And and that we didn't first say, well, which customer,
Wow.
right? So we have our internal customer, which are the human beings with the name badge and our fancy titles. And then there's the external customers, and those are many different folks, either from the vendors that are coming into our organizations or the patients and caregivers that are walking in at the most vulnerable time in their life. But we have conflated the customer, and so we haven't done targeted, intentional, and attentional care of that first customer, which is the internal customer. And if they are not well physically, mentally, and spiritually, there is no way they're going to be able to take care of the other customers of that organization, right? We don't like to think of healthcare as a customer service or a customer delivery service line. We think of it as patients, we think of it as caregivers, we think of it as providers providing something to the patient. But in the very essence, there is that internal, external human beings. And we forgot the first people first, which were the folks with the stethoscopes, with the blood pressure cuffs, and everyone who dons a ID every day. And as soon as you walk in with that ID badge, you already have an asymmetrical power relationship to those people that are external, the
Mm.
patients and caregivers that are walking in. So we've already decided. But even before the pandemic, we wore masks, and we covered. So there's a really great article put out and publication by Deloitte that talks about the way in which we all cover at work, in 4 different axes. And so we were already covering, and we were exhausting ourselves getting prepared for work even before the pandemic. What the pandemic did for us is we literally put on masks, and we social distanced, and we isolated. And human beings are completely wired for connection. So you have taken the nutrition from human beings by taking us away from each other.
Mhm.
Um, and then you put us in an environment in which we have to highly function because we have to save lives. And that disconnects us on another level as well, right? Out of
Mhm.
that. So I'll pause. Does that make sense?
Susan, it's fantastic, your points. In fact, we got comments from folks on the live broadcast that are identifying you're making excellent points. And I want to stop for a moment and just touch on something I think was super, super critical. You said we were wearing masks before we were wearing masks.
Hmm.
And I think can you just touch on ways that maybe just on a practical sense, we can just allow ourselves to take off that mask? We've taken off the pandemic mask, but maybe we've put on that workplace mask again. What are some thoughts you have along those lines?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we do all armor up, right? So sometimes we're already driving to work and we're saying already has a tape going in our mind of how bad it's going to be. So by the time we're opening the door, we're actually loaded for war. Um, which is why we don't make eye contact and we grunt at each other. I am always curious about when I walk into a waiting room if the lights are going to be on. So every waiting room have these swanky lamps on end tables. They're never on. And that is always for me a sign that no one else is on either. And that people have walked past those lamps and they are already, doggone it, this person's coming in and I'm going to have to work with this person. They're not
Yeah.
even noticing their environment. And so the one way that I feel like the first thing that we can do before we even walk into the building, before we leave in the car, is do a simple meditation with ourselves, of grounding ourselves, right? Because as we're driving to work, we've also maybe dropped off children at 5 different schools. The dog threw up. Um, the mother-in-law called. I don't know what your house looks like. I live with a middle schooler, so
I got
Lots of
one of those elementary and high school, so I got a trifecta going on, right?
Yeah. So you're already have endured 8 hours in the first hour of your day. And then you turn on the radio and you hear about a war, you hear about a mass shooting, you hear about the world blowing up, you know, all of those things. So by the time you get to your parking spot, if there is even parking at your medical campus, which, that's a whole nother thing. Um, you're you're pretty much not yourself any longer. You've
Right.
already covered in mass. So one of the first things that I have that I do before I move into that is I literally turn everything off and I put my hand on my stomach and I say to myself, "Are you here, Susan?" Right? Because all of those things I just described, I've left my body, right? I've left the presence of myself and I have disembodied myself from myself. So then it wouldn't be if I don't do that, then Jeff, if you're the first person I greet, I may say to you, I've had a miserable morning. Don't even talk to me. And that might be how I greet you, right? But if I take a moment and I ask myself, am I here? And then I say to myself, be more human than is humanly possible. Then
Mhm.
when I meet you, Jeff, I say, good morning. It's
Mm.
really good to see you. Even if you're not my favorite person, I'm still going to be more likely to say good morning to you. And I'm going to look at you with some sort of tenderness that you deserve as a human because I decided to be more human than humanly possible, which means I have to see our shared humanity. And if I don't do that, I walk past you and I grunt. And then you know what you do? Oh, here she is. So sick of Susan. And then you look at Kathy in the hallway and you're like, I don't even know why I bothered to show up today. And it then becomes a competition
Mm.
of who's had the worst morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're really talking about this power of presence. How do we show up cognitively, physically, and emotionally? I love what you said about practicing this meditation, really turning everything off and asking ourselves that question. That's fantastic. Go ahead, Dr. Albert.
Uh, I think that you just touched on the whole notion that you've stated as intentional tenderness. And it really is awareness of how we show up, awareness of our presence, and how we can extend a positive energy
Mhm.
so we can have an impact and make a difference in our immediate environment and on ours. If we extend gratitude and positivity, it's really chemically going to change how we show up. I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about apology.
Okay.
So, there is a lot of literature that talks about the connection with empathy and apology,
Hmm.
and wanted to get your take on how an apology or lack thereof impacts us as workers.
Yeah. Well, this is particularly true in our world of healthcare, right? The malpractice insurance companies have really told us that to utter an apology will mean you'll get sued. And we've taken that to its like most ultimate conclusion, which means I can't even apologize to a colleague, right? And so um, uh, uh, let me first go back to tenderness because if you don't get tenderness right, you're not going to get the apology right, right?
Mhm.
So I think that when people hear words like kindness, compassion, empathy, tenderness, they see these as kind of slippery, soft words, right? That if I'm tender to someone, then um, they don't, then I won't hold them accountable. But to be truly tender, you have to have incredible gastrointestinal fortitude, right? Because you have to have a soft front and a tough spine, right? You've got to be able to say to someone, I know you're going through a lot. at home. And I need you to know that when you said that sarcastic thing to me when I walked in today, it really impelled
Mhm.
my heart, right? That's being
Mhm.
tender, right? Now, what that other person then is allowed to say is, well, you take things too seriously. That wasn't my intention, right? That is not an apology. Um, that is diminishing and mean, right? Um, so the example would be, I don't really care about your good intentions. I care about how your words impacted me, right? And so if you were driving to work today and someone rear-ended you, and when you got out of the car and saw the damage, if the first words out of their mouth was, well, it wasn't my intention, you wouldn't say, well, get out of here then, sir. Doesn't, right? But
That's all right. Yeah.
but that's what we're doing all day to people. We're rear-ending them and then saying
Hmm. Good
that,
analogy.
you know, my words should not be held accountable because it wasn't my intention to wound you, right? So, tenderness is focused and sharp. It means we handle each other with care and we acknowledge each other's humanity while still holding people responsible and accountable for their words and
Mhm.
actions. An
Mhm.
apology, on the other hand, has really four components, and they're rather simple. They're seductively simple, but very hard to do. It's first taking responsibility for the harm, right? And showing remorse about the harm. Even if you think, I think this person really took me out of context, it doesn't matter. The first thing you should say is, wow, that really packed a punch. And I want to acknowledge that while I thought I was being hilarious, my hilarity landed hard. Um, and that means we're now out of harmony. And then offering to repair the damage. Hey, I will not do that to you again, and here are the actions that I will take so that you know I'm good for it, right?
Mhm.
Some of the best ways that we can offer apology is in the moment, um, acknowledging and just saying, ouch, I did hurt you, and what can I do today to show you my deep regret for that
Mhm.
wounding I did? And unless you're working with someone who's just a complete jerk, what they're normally going to say is, "A what?" Because they're going to be so caught off guard that you actually took responsibility for that wounding. Yeah. Uh,
That's interesting that you say that because that's in a lot of ways saying that it's not common to apologize and hold ourselves accountable. And I think that the lack of apology, first and foremost, the first step is to recognize within ourselves, did our words or actions have an impact on someone else? So awareness and having that self-reflection and insight as to us as individuals. But when we are offended, it's great to be tender and vulnerable and express what we're experiencing. But when the person on the other side of the table or the other side of the phone is defensive and doesn't acknowledge, I mean, there's a lot of that.
yeah,
And that's
that's right.
that's the challenging piece of showing up as a tender, compassionate, apologetic being.
Yeah.
I think one thought that goes along with that, and we see a comment here from Robin as well, is that this whole ideology, Susan, of having a strong, a soft front and a strong spine. I mean, this you're touching on gold right now, because the reality is in the workplace outside of healthcare, and see if this resonates with something you've seen in healthcare as well. We know for sure in the government is that you're not taught or asked to apologize. And when you do, it feels so disingenuous and scripted. And the receivers know that. And it does the opposite. He or she may have quote unquote apologized, but all they did was go through an exercise so that they would have the appearance of apology.
Mhm.
Can you just kind of give us like what would be the sort of the framework, the setting that you think would work best in order to both be authentic and sincere with our apology, and also so that somebody would be able to receive the apology the way that we intend it to be received.
Yeah. So we can never be in control of how people receive our apology, right? Because we don't know all of the things that is in their familial and emotional dowry that they bring to the table, right? So all of us in the workplace have a family emotional dowry that is related to trust and conflict. Okay. So if you come from a family where you're very expressive when you're fighting in conflict, and you're working alongside people that came from a more passive aggressive family, right? You're already going to be in danger of being in conflict together. Great news. We don't have to be our the dowry that we were born into, but it does mean it's set up. So if you work with other humans, you will have conflict and you'll get to practice apology and tenderness moment by moment.
Mhm.
And and if you decide to actually interact with those human beings, then even more so, bravo, you are going to get tons of practice at this. There's
Mhm.
lots of ways that this can look. During the early days of COVID, when we were shutting down and we were homeschooling and our dogs were on our laps and our cats would not cooperate. There were lots of ways in which we didn't arise to a challenge. And I noticed several months into team meetings that I was landing hard with my team. I could just see it on their little thumbnails on the Zoom. And and I had a couple of opportunities, pretend it wasn't happening and say, well, I deserve to be it's really a tough time, right?
Right.
Or I could acknowledge it in the group setting. And so I acknowledged it in the group setting. And
Mhm.
said this: I don't know what your experience with me has been like over the past few months, but I know what my experience with me has been. And I haven't really liked her.
Mm.
So if I don't like her, how mad and you don't like her, right?
Right.
And I said, and here's the things I have done poorly.
Mm.
And I named them. And a couple of my colleagues said, we're making excuses. It's been a hard time. It's been a hard time. And I could have said, you're right. You're right. But that's not an apology. The
Mm.
apology is what I said was, all those things are true. And it does not give me the excuse to not rise to the occasion as the leader,
Bravo. Wow.
right? Now,
Mhm.
did I want to do any of that? No. I wanted to have a little tantrum. I want to say life was hard. I don't know what you think it's like being with a sixth grader and and a poodle that needs me more than I need her. I had compelling things to say, but I was a jerk. I was not my best self. And I don't care that
Mhm.
I was stressed out. I was having collective grief like everyone else. Guess what? I was the titled leader. And so, therefore, I had the responsibility to get my crap together. And that meant going first and saying, I don't like myself. That means you don't like me because I have not been the leader that I could be and should be during this moment in time. That's an apology. They didn't have to receive it. They could have said, "Peace out, Susan. You've, you know," and they had every right to do that. But that's what an apology looks like. It is circling back. It is doing it multiple times if you need to, and it's
Mm.
asking permission, right?
Mm.
So, so Jeff, I may have had a conflict with you. I know I did something. I'm going to say, Jeff, tomorrow at 8, can we meet before work? And you may say, no. And I would say, because I've done this harm. And so I will say, when you're ready, you let me know and I will carve out time for you. So then we meet and I have an invitation to you. And I say, Jeff, tell me the hurt I've caused. And you'll say something like, you were
Mm.
dismissive in a meeting. And then what I say back to you, Jeff, is, so I want to get this right. You said, and what I heard is that in our last meeting together in front of others, I was dismissive. Did I hear that right? And you'll say, yeah, right
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And then my tendency will be like, I'm out of here. I just did the great thing. But that's not the
Mhm.
end of an apology. What I'm going to say
Mm.
next is, Jeff, is there more you want to tell me about that hurt?
Oh, wow. Wow.
And
Stay
then,
there for a moment. Wow. That is deep, Susan, because I think I felt good at that moment, like it was done. But no, this is good stuff. Keep going. Wow.
yeah. So this comes out of the work of Dr. Hendricks and his Safe Conversations, Arvil Hendricks. And of course, I'm not doing it perfectly. But the truth is then if I'm not ready to apologize and fully take it in, then I shouldn't be apologizing.
Mm.
I should wait until I'm ready because you deserve to tell me all the ways in which, and that is showing sincerity. And that's showing that I'm not just saying, sorry, 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 right? I'm saying, tell me more. Is there more that you want to tell me? And then I have to allow that. And then I have to say it back to you because what I heard is my own story. I need to make sure I'm accurately hearing it, and then you get to say, no, that wasn't quite right or right on. And then I will say once more, is there more you need me to know?
Wow.
And
Mhm.
then when we get to the point that you say, no, I'm complete, that's when I say, I want to ask your forgiveness. And then I list the things I just heard. And then you get to choose whether you're going to accept the apology and grant me forgiveness. But regardless, it's on me because I was the one who did harm. And that is an intentional apology that is tender all the way because I have to sit with it and I can't defend myself. I can't say, come on, don't you know what I had 20 patients today? But,
Yeah.
all the things I'd want to tell you in my defense. I'm a good person. I'm a Christian.
Wow.
I've got cute earrings, all the things I'm telling myself that I've heard, by the way, in all of these
Right.
apologies that people have given. They said, tell me their faith. Oh, so possibly I couldn't be mean because I come from this faith tradition,
Right.
whatever. So that's how it looks. And it's
Mm.
really hard. And it's everything I don't want to do, by the way.
What would the healthcare workplace look like if this was taking place? I'd love for both you and Kathy to comment on what would it look like if tenderness and apology was taking place in the healthcare workplace today?
Well, first, I think we all have a responsibility to lean in and lead, whether we're untitled or titled individuals working in healthcare. Everything that you just described, Susan, is transformative. These are elements and characteristics that we harbor and perhaps need to expand upon and grow that are really going to impact our experience, our relationships, build trust. And I think the difference is going to be made by us, by the community. But the tenderness, the apology, which is, I think, the invitation for the dialogue, the deeper discussion, this is the work that we need to do as human beings. This type of stuff, the growing ourselves and characteristics of compassion and tenderness is really one of the key ingredients to making a difference in our experience as healthcare workers in this very complex ecosystem.
Yeah. So here's what would happen in healthcare if we did these things routinely, consistently, and well. There would be less mistakes happening every day.
Mm.
Because in the moment you decide to be tender and apologize, you also now are open to asking for support and help. And and so that means that we're more available cognitively and in every dimension of our being to see what's in front of us, right? The minute we decide to mask up and armor up when we're
Mm.
walking into uh, the healthcare setting is the moment that we are also become very blind to everything that's happening around us, and that's how mistakes happen because we're ashamed of making mistakes, we're afraid of failure, and humans make mistakes and we fail. And if we do not have an environment in which failure can happen, but also restoration can happen, we already have lost the brief. It means that we're going to not handle very well when patients yell at us. Patients, what I'm hearing from my colleagues in healthcare is that patient and caregivers are becoming more and more demanding, and there's a lot of behavioral problems, right? And so how do we withstand that and then go and greet a colleague and get walloped as well? So healthcare transformed the moment each of us individually decide to walk into our day differently.
Mm,
I don't
love
accept,
that.
I do
Love
not
that.
accept that people not saying hello
Mm.
to a colleague. I do not accept that. And so how it has looked in my life is I have greeted someone and I got grunted back
Mm.
at, and I had a choice: roll my eyes and keep walking. My second choice was grunt back. My third choice was to give someone the riot act about how I deserve better. Right? These are all options I see played out all the time on
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
the hallways, by the way. My final option is I could say, "Oh, hey, Kathy, you must have not heard me when I said hello and good morning." And then I'm going to stand in front of you awkwardly.
Be awkward.
And then at some point, Kathy is going to not be able to resist because
Right.
she's going to want me out of her world. And she's going to finally say good morning. Now, it might not be a
Mm.
happy good morning. That's okay. And then I will say to her, "I can't wait to see you tomorrow morning at the same time, same place." Because I know that Kathy always sits in the same place. And guess what's going to happen next tomorrow? Kathy is going to greet me before I can have that weird interaction again. Guess what happens to me and Kathy's relationship from there on?
Right, right.
We
I do
are
think,
we're
yeah.
tender. So
Yeah.
that's how it looks
Hmm.
throughout your day, is you
Wow.
have a choice every moment to either play a part in the crap or to bring a lightness and levity to yourself and to others. And I know what
Hmm.
I'm going to choose because I don't want to kick the dog when I get home at night because
Mm.
I'm so exhausted by my workplace. I can't change the big S system, but I can change this system. And this
Mm.
system is Susan. And that's why I start with, "Are you here?" Because if I'm not
Right,
here, that means I walk
Yeah.
through the world and you all are invisible to me.
right.
You know what I love, Susan, is that you are reminding us that we matter.
He has disappeared.
Showing. Uh,
Join.
That
We're
was
back.
weird. The computer
I
decided to
know.
change, but Matt, you're just reminding us that all of our voices matter, that our presence matters, and that courage is so critical and important in this adventure. I would argue, and tell me if you agree, that there's a voice in us that says, "Oh, but if we don't show up, if we show up tender towards somebody, well, they're going to think we're weak. They're going to take advantage of us. They're going to think we're soft, and then they're going to walk all over us. So I've got to be tough Ted. I got to walk in. I got to bark. I got to yell a little bit. I got to show people I'm in charge. And then maybe to one or two people, I'll be somewhat tender. But at the end of the day, people will fear me.
Mm,
And if they fear me, then they're
mm.
going to do the work that I asked them to do.
Yeah,
I think that's a
great.
crazy mentality. Do you see that? Is that something that the healthcare workplace sees now and then, or more often than we hate to admit?
I think all workplaces, listen, a lot of us are playing a lot of different roles. There is, the person with a whistle around their neck. It's not a real whistle, it's a metaphor. And anytime anyone does anything wrong, they're whistling and making sure everyone sees it, right? There's the sheriff that has deputized themselves and they're always pulling people over all day long, issuing citations, right? when you were talking about the kind of the barking, I was thinking of a Viking hat, right? And so there's some of us that are little mini Vikings, and we're walking in, we're gonna go clobber anyone in our way, right? Yeah, listen, no one likes this word tenderness. It just seems so fluffy and crazy.
Mhm.
What I know is the most tender people I know are the most boundaried as well.
Wow.
Um, it, you cannot be tender and not have a boundary. You cannot be tender and be a doormat. Um, you know, uh, Kathy can, be honest about what it was like to work with me, but I don't think I was just a fluffy, no backboned human being. Part of tender is using radical candor.
Mhm.
Um, I say, I like you too much, Jeff, for you to keep doing this throughout the day. Or Kathy, can I talk to you a minute? I don't know if you know this, but right now there's a real buzz about you in the workplace. They all really think you're kind of mean, and I know that's not who you are. And
Mhm.
and by the way, Kathy, no one knows what I know, that you've got all this stuff going on. So all they think is that you're a jerk. Is that how you want to be on Wednesday? Right? That's being tender. It's letting people know, letting them in on the act of like, oof,
Right.
Yeah.
you got
Emperor
to
has
tuck
no
in.
clothes. Yeah.
Got to tuck in that crazy, because then you're also asking people to do that for you too when you're not yourself,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You're not coming off like the Susan that people really have liked other days. Who is this Susan that just arrived? So again, I know that tenderness gets a bad rap, kindness gets a bad rap. I'm okay with that. I know who I am at 51, and I know that it takes just a lot of fortitude to do it.
Mhm.
When I was thinking about you all today, there's this poem by Naomi Shihab Nye called Kindness. And the opening line is, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. So if anyone is listening to us today and you've grieved, right, if you've lost things, there's nothing harder than that. So if you come through the grief fire, and you're still intact on the other side, I don't know a tougher human being. So don't tell me kindness and tenderness is some sort of weakness, because that opening line nails it. Before you know what kindness really is, you got to lose things. So the most tender people I know have lost things. They've been tested. They've walked through the fire, and they came through that fire, and they said, we can all make it. And I'm going to show you how. And that's tenderness. I know I'm preaching, but I couldn't be more passionate about this, because people that avoid suffering, that's the weak of spirit, not the
Mm.
people that are facing the world as it is. And even with what we just saw this weekend, I can choose to be tender
Mm.
Mhm.
today.
Wonderful, Susan, just incredible. Mark Collins, who's a leader in Washington D.C., has about 120 individuals that he leads. Asks us, what do we think about forgiveness,
Yeah,
especially for people we don't like? Forgive
yeah,
others and forgive ourselves. Take us
yeah,
down that road, Susan.
yeah. Forgiveness is the mercy we give to ourselves, not to the other person,
Mhm.
right? Um, So there's this old story, and I'll get to the point, but I think everything is better through a story. There's two uh, Buddhist monks, and they are walking down a road, and they're not supposed to be interacting with other human beings. They're on a prayer vigil, and they come across an older woman who can't cross over the street because there's all this water. And the one monk picks up the woman and puts her on the other side of the street and keeps walking alongside his companion. And about 2 hours later, the other monk says, I cannot believe you interacted with that woman and put her over on the other side of the street. And the other monk said, I can't believe you're still carrying the woman. Okay, so forgiveness is about putting the woman down and walking forward. Forgiveness, forgiving others, even when they don't deserve it, is about giving ourselves mercy so that we can be unburdened by the resentment by the hurt. And it takes incredible work to get there. And just because you forgive someone doesn't mean that they're not accountable. But there are lots of things that we forgive in life that happen long after someone dies, right? We might have had an abusive parent who never apologizes. And at some point, we say, I'm going to forgive you.
Mm-hmm. We are running out of time. And if anybody, I'm sitting here in awe. I just so appreciate you being here, Susan. You are a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, and this has been so insightful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will
Oh my
be
gosh, thank you.
sponsoring a workshop breakout session the end of the summer that really allows us as providers to dive into grow our tenderness and ability to forgive ourselves and help make a difference in the healthcare community where we exist. So go to work tomorrow, say hi to everyone in the hallway. And thanks for joining. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.
I'll see you guys next time. And Susan, we're going to be inviting you back. My goodness, that was a quick 45 minutes. Again, thank you all. We'll see you next time.